Hi everyone, this is a real short video on some essential debate skills that might take you to the next level when we're doing the final two debates in our class. Um, so again, real short here, but I wanted to talk about these things for those of you that are looking to improve. First of all, uh, a debate skill called flowing, which is just a technique for taking notes during a debate. This is probably the most important skill I can talk to you about because taking good notes will help you really improve your rebuttals. And the rebuttals, most of you have realized at this point, are where the debates can really be won or lost. Everyone can offer a good case, but it's the team that does a better job of rebutting that case as well as comparing your case to their case that tends to win the debate. So flowing can help you do that by making sure that you're understanding and responding to all of the arguments that the other team makes. So again, take notes. I can't stress this enough. Whether you follow the kind of format that I'm going to show you to take notes, or whether you just write and take notes, either way is fine. But the more notes you take, the better it will be. This also includes if you are doing a constructive and not the rebuttal, because you can help your teammates out by taking notes. And I encourage you to use that prep time before the rebuttal, and even maybe, have a text message open or something like that with your teammates so that you can, send comments to them during that prep time. The biggest thing here again is just constantly be writing. You should try to write down as much of everything that the other team says as you can. You might notice from the notes that I send you that I write down pretty much like every source, every major claim, as much data as I can get down as possible, because it helps me evaluate the debate, and it should help you do that as well. One of the tips that a lot of debaters use in flowing is they take a sheet of paper, and I'll show you an example here in a second, and they kind of divide the paper up into columns with lines where each column represents a different speech. What this allows you to do is kind of get an overview of the debate and see exactly where arguments have been responded to and when they have not been responded to. And I'll show you that here more in a second. But just take a regular sheet of paper um, and draw lines down it, and one line for each speech. So the 1AC, the 1NC, the 2AC, the 2NC, etc. Obviously, it's hard to write down every word, especially if you're writing full words down. So use abbreviations and try to come up with your own abbreviations for commonly used words in the topic. I have a few suggestions here. DF can be defund, P can be police, SS maybe social services, MH mental health, CR for crime. You can use whatever abbreviations you want. Oftentimes I'll use an arrow for increases or decreases, or leads to if you have an arrow that kind of like, or causes, that goes to the side there. Also, a tip here can be, you can get in the practice of dropping vowels. So if you don't have an abbreviation for a term, let's say, they say something like homelessness. Or homeless, you can drop vowels and just write HMLSS, right? Homeless. And these are good tips for taking notes in class as well, right? Coming up with your common abbreviations, getting in the habit of dropping vowels so you can write things down even quicker. I also really encourage you to take notes on paper. There's a lot of actual studies in media and technology that show that when you write something down, it tends to stick in your head better than when you type it. And the reason for that is in order to write something down, you have to sort of like summarize it in your own terms and then write it down. Whereas when you're typing, we tend to just transcribe exactly. And that process of summarizing something in your own terms and writing it down leads to better recall of the arguments than just transcribing something kind of mindlessly and such. Um, Also, I like to put a little note when they have a source. Sometimes I'll just write source, or draw an X or something like that. That way I know which of their arguments have been backed up with evidence and which ones have not. And I can maybe make that argument if they have not backed up an argument with evidence. So let me show you just a picture here. You see the columns, right? Affirmative, negative. They've noted when they have sources, so they have NYT for New York Times. You see them using abbreviations 1 trill in Maj for majority to exp for expensive. And you see the negative to the right of that saying F has no source, right? So they're taking note of that here, you know, there's no source. So flowing can help you also kind of prep out your arguments, especially in the rebuttal. You can write them in this column and then pull them up for your speech. The second skill I want to talk about a little bit is cross-examination. First of all, in cross-examination, the first thing you should do is ask clarification questions. If you don't understand an advantage or a disadvantage, if you're not sure what the plan or the counterplan does, be sure that you get those clarifications during cross-examination. The second thing, and the important thing to try to do in cross-examination and try to score points with the audience, is to ask questions that set up your argument. So you can ask yourself sort of, what am I going to challenge about this argument? Am I going to challenge their credibility? Am I going to challenge the sufficiency of their evidence? Am I going to challenge the relevance of their claim? Am I going to question the impact, how much impact or significance this argument has? Just ask yourself that question, and then you can set up questions, right? If you're going to challenge credibility, you might say, oh, so what are the qualifications of this author? If you're going to challenge sufficiency, you might ask, well, how many sources did you have for that? How many people was that study based upon? How many years? How many states? Right? Those kinds of questions, which will help make your rebuttal even stronger. So you might want to actually talk to your rebuttalist about how they're going to respond to these, and then you can help ask questions that will help them later in the debate. One thing not to do is don't ask open-ended questions. So don't ask questions like, can you explain this? Or how would you respond to this? Those questions just give the other team time in order to answer, and it's more like giving them more speech time. So try to ask specific questions that have kind of a short answer. Again, what's your source? How many people did they study? Those are sort of closed questions, right? Not questions like, how do you respond to this? Or what about this, right? This is not a time for you to make arguments as the questioner. It's a time for you to set up arguments that you'll later make. So I see this happen a lot, and it's something not to do, where the negative or the cross-examination will say, well, I have this source that says X, Y, and Z, how will you respond to that? First of all, that's not much of a question. And second of all, again, it just gives them time to explain their case more. You don't want to give them that extra speech time. And finally, you can prep questions in advance. I, again, suggest working with your rebuttalist to do so. Ask them, how are you going to challenge this argument, this advantage or this disadvantage, and then work backwards from there, right? Oh, if you're going to challenge the credibility, then maybe I should ask these questions. If you're going to challenge the sufficiency, maybe I should ask these questions, etc. The final skill I want to talk about is doing rebuttals. Again, rebuttals are, probably the hardest skill to master in debate. Because you're having to think more on your feet and respond to their claims, but you're also having to kind of do a comparative wrap up of the debate, suggesting why your team has won in the face of all the arguments the other team has made. So a couple tips here. The first thing is really pay attention to what they didn't answer or didn't answer enough, because oftentimes in debates, you'll win debates because the other team didn't sufficiently answer one of your major points. So if you have an advantage, a social services advantage, and they don't really have much response to that, stress that, emphasize that. Say, hey, look, notice they haven't really responded to our social services advantage. Or all they said was, one response about how social services might not work that great. that's not much of a response. We have this evidence that says X. We have this evidence that says Y. And really drive home those points because, again, the points that are least contested are the ones that you're going to most clearly win on. And then when you do that, tell us why that matters the most. Why is this advantage about social services that they have not answered very well really important? Some things that you can talk about to say that it matters are the scale, right? This is affecting, there's millions of people with mental health. There's millions of police calls to incidents with mental health. So, this is a big problem. Look at the scale of it. You can talk about the time frame, right? Like this is happening right now. This happens day in and day out. And that's why it's more important. And you can also talk about the probability, right? They haven't responded to this. We know that this will happen. This is more of a certainty than their arguments. They're claiming that crime will increase, but they can't tell us how much crime will increase. They can't prove that definitively that the police actually solve crime. And in that case, our arguments are more probable or more likely to take place than theirs. So these are some ways that you can extend your arguments, but also tell us why your arguments matter the most. And then finally, you should be trying to compare your advantages or disadvantages to their advantages or disadvantages. This is basically kind of your summary about why you think, your arguments are superior to their arguments. Again, you can say our arguments are more likely. They haven't challenged them enough. The probability of these things happening is higher. You can say we've offered more evidence than they have on these points. You can say our sources are more credible. You can say that the impact of our arguments are more significant, right? The crime disadvantage. Crime affects everyone. Crime destroys families and destroys lives. So this is a more significant impact than the comparatively rare police killing of unarmed people. And finally, and this is sort of like a next level type debate argument, is making even if statements. So even if they win the social services advantage, our crime disadvantage is more significant, more probable. Even if they win the social services advantage or the crime disadvantage, our social services advantage is more likely and more probable. Or even if they win the crime disadvantage, it's just immoral or unethical to allow police to continue abusing black people. So it's worth the risk of a little more crime to get rid of this moral stain on America, right? So trying to frame the debate in a way that says, even if the other side wins their argument, we still win the debate because, again, our evidence is more likely, or our arguments are more likely, we have more evidence, we have more credible evidence, or more significant arguments are all possible ways that you can do that in the last rebuttal. Again, trying to, as a rebuttalist, kind of put yourself in the judge's shoes, thinking about, okay, they have, as a judge, I understand they have these arguments and we have these arguments. So how would what would I need to say in order to side with one side or another? And if you can put yourself in those shoes and make those comparisons, then you don't leave it up to the judges to do that, and you're much more likely to win the debate. So those are just a few tips, a few debate skills that should help you in these debates. We have a WebEx meeting today when you're supposed to watch this video. So if you have questions, please tune in and have a great rest of the week.